Okay, so this week we've received a couple of inquiries from people looking to purchase or lease a commercial premises. Now, I'm not talking about commercial premises that are in a commercial based zone or commercial premises that have the benefit of the commercial character building overlay. I'm talking about commercial premises that look like a shop, that operate like a shop, but that have no obvious support to be a shop under the planning scheme. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, when I receive these inquiries, I cringe. You will always get a delayed response from me on these inquiries because I will always put them in the too hard basket. In this week's video, we're going to talk about why I do that. Okay, so why do I absolutely cringe when I receive these inquiries? Well, quite simply, if you don't have the benefit of the commercial zone, or if you don't have the benefit of the CCB, commercial character building overlay, then unfortunately you need to jump through a bucket load of hoops to try and prove that the use is legit. And more often than not, those hoops lead to dead ends. It is super frustrating. So to help you understand why I say that, we're going to talk through the 3 steps that you need to follow to prove that a use is legit. Let's start with step number 1. First and foremost, you need to prove that the use was lawfully established in the first instance. So either that it didn't need a town planning approval at the time of commencement or that it obtained that approval. Now, when it comes to not needing town planning approval, town planning sort of came into effect in the 1960s. Don't quote me on it. I think the first planning scheme was like 1961 or something. So if the use was commenced prior to 1961, you're pretty safe to say that it didn't actually need town planning approval, which means it was lawfully established. Now, between, let's say, 1960s and 1987, the town planning schemes were a little bit wishy-washy. So there's a good chance, again, that you probably didn't need town planning approval. Not in every situation, but generally speaking. Once you get beyond the 1987 town planning, things got really tight, really over the top, really complex. So there is a very good chance that you do need or did need town planning approval. Now, the problem is you need to try and find someone who can interpret the planning scheme that was in play at the time. So obviously, prior to 1961, who cares? There was no scheme. Again, don't quote me on the date. 1961 to 1961 to the current planning scheme. Yeah, you've got to find someone who was operating at that time and who has the ability to go back and reinterpret the rulebook at that point. Now, my career started under City Plan 2000, which is the previous planning scheme. You get me to go back and look at that thing and I am totally lost. I'm just totally confused. It takes me forever to get my head back into that space to be able to interpret things under that scheme. So it is not a straightforward process. And those old planning schemes, they were really complex, just saying. So yeah, you got to work out, okay, did you actually need an approval? Or you need to go through and find evidence of that approval. Now, I'll tell you up front, 1974 floods, we lost a lot of our records. As a result, even if they did get approval back then, there's a very good chance that that approval or evidence of that approval no longer exists. So that first step, determining whether it was lawfully established in the first instance, is really difficult. Now, let's talk about step number 2. If you can actually work out that a use was lawfully established, then you need to work out what was established. So what was approved? What was the definition of the use that they used at that point in time? Then you need to convert it to modern terminology. So for each planning scheme that comes out, they tend to change the definitions and the names of things. So you need to work out, like I said, what was it approved as? What does that convert to today? And does what you're actually proposing fit within that new definition? And therefore, is it same or is it not so same? Now look at step number 3. Once you've worked out it was lawfully established and that your definitions are same, if you're lucky enough to get to that point, then what you need to do lastly is to work out whether the use has continuously operated since that very beginning. So that means you need to go through things like yellow pages, online records, all of that sort of stuff to make sure, like I said, that the use has been continuous throughout time, that the use has not been abandoned. Now, to help explain this point in a little bit more detail, I'll give you an example that came up when I was actually working at council. I heard rumours of a law case, or a legal case, I should say, court case, that's a better way of saying it, a court case where a petrol station had ceased use on the premises. So basically, let's say it was BP for argument's sake. BP had moved out of the site. As part of their policies, they needed to decommission the tanks under the ground, so basically pull them apart. So they did that. The real estate agent then came in and advertised the property as being developable. Let's say it had development potential. It could be developed for high-rise units, that sort of stuff. Fast forward a couple of years later, a new petrol station comes in and they purchase the property. Actually, it probably wasn't a few years later. That's a bit of an exaggeration. Let's say a couple of months later, they purchased the premises. They came in, recommissioned the tanks and wanted to keep operating. What council deemed in that situation is that the use had ceased. Number one, because the tanks had been decommissioned, and number two, because it had been advertised for other opportunities or other uses. So that second petrol station had to come in and reapply for the use. It was not pretty for them. So yes, you need to go back and prove, like I said, that it was lawfully established and that it has continued to operate ever since that point in time. The use has not ceased or changed at any point. Usually, you get stuck on step number one. If you're super lucky and you get your hands on an approval, one of those rare approvals that still exist, then you got to talk through, okay, well, the definitions, the terms, what was approved back then, what does that convert to now? And then you've got to work out, okay, has it continuously operated through time? Yeah, that is a lot of work. And like I said, more often than not, you get hit with hurt or dead ends and you just do not pass. It is super frustrating. More often than not, because we hit those dead ends, what we end up saying to people is, look, the reality is if you want certainty, you've actually got to go and lodge a new application. Yeah, people don't like hearing that. Well, the alternative, I guess, is you take the risk, you take the punt that no one's ever going to complain. Yeah, you got legal issues, you got, what's it called? Liability issues, all that sort of stuff. Insurance issues, that's what I was trying to say. Insurance issues, it's not a good path to go down. I would not recommend you do that. So that concludes this week's video. If you've liked this video, I'd encourage you to like, comment and share because I love seeing those likes, comments and shares come through. Until next time, thanks for watching.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got three. Number one, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site specific. You would be a silly billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly billy. Number two, Brisbane town planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number three, what was my number three? Oh yeah, the views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all. Bye.